Hey guys, here's a little update to the first video showing how to assemble the front suspension kit for the RC28 cars made by Associated. So I think I mentioned on a previous video that Associated actually changed the shocks from when I started designing this set, and they went to this what I was calling more like a ball cup type shock on the top and bottom versus the old ones that had just a hole that went all the way through. And so this caused some additional work that you would have to do with if you bought these shocks from Associated. Plus these things are about 12 bucks for the set. That does come with the springs, but it still kind of seems like a lot. So on the other video I showed you how you can drill a hole all the way through these, and then you can take a Dremel tool or something and sort of grind off the back of these and make them acceptable to use. And then I can supply a bigger collar that'll take up that additional space. But I thought it would actually be easier, and again I think I mentioned this in another video, to just go ahead and include the shocks on the parts tree like you see here. And so I made a set initially. I needed to go back and change one thing, so this is the updated one now that that seems like it's good to go. So I just wanted to show a quick video because there is some preparation work that you need to do to get these shocks working smoothly, because again they are printed. You know, these holes in these are pretty small, the shafts on these are pretty small, so they need a little fine-tuning to get them to work good. So on part one of the video I showed you how, starting with this tree parts tree here, to separate all the parts from the tree, and then you know, the holes that you need to ream and so on. So basically on this video I'm just going to show you those steps, but just for these shocks here, because everything else, the rest of the parts tree is literally exactly the same as it was before. All I did was added these shocks. So the first thing that you can do is you can separate those off there using a blade, or however you want to do it. Again, don't hurt yourself. You know, you can just snip them off with a pair of cutters. So again, this part at this point is exactly the same. I'm just going to set it aside. There's a whole video showing this part. And then likewise, these little shock collars here for adjusting spring tension, that's all unchanged too. So I'm going to go ahead and snip those off here and set those aside. So again, really what we're going to be focusing on then is just the shock pieces that you see here. So 2 upper shock bodies and 2 lower shock bodies. So again, take either your hobby knife or, you know, a pair of cutters like these, and you're just going to trim these things off here real quick. You know, pretty normal stuff here. Separate these off, try and get it nice and flush so it looks good if you can. And again, don't let the parts fly across the room like I did on that other video, because they're small and they're really hard to find. But anyway, so go ahead and trim all these off here like that. Okay, so that's the first step, is just getting them off the parts tree and getting them separated like that. If you want, you can take a little file and sort of smooth out the areas here that you clipped them off. You know, I don't think it really shows. As I mentioned before, when you clip these things off, because the way Shapeways colors these parts, you're going to expose some of the white internal plastic there. So honestly, what I do is just take a Sharpie and fill that in a little bit like that, and you know, you're not even going to notice it once it's on the car. You could probably take some kind of black paint or something and do the same thing, but honestly I'm lazy and I feel like the Sharpie works pretty decent. I'm not going to do it on all these, but you get the point. You can fill those in so that those white areas don't show. If you order the shocks and you know, the assembly here in white, then obviously it won't be an issue. So a couple things you got to do. Again, if you take these and you just try and assemble them right away as you've clipped them off, you'll see they're really tight. In fact, I can't even push this all the way in here. And again, you know, the tolerances can only be held so tight on these little tiny printed parts. So there's a few things you need to do to clean them up and get them to operate smooth here. So the first one is on the upper shock part here. You want to actually run a drill through the bore of this. The bore on this thing goes up to about where this little collar is that I'm putting my thumbnail. So you don't want to drill in any further than that. That's really all the further that the the shock shaft travels in there anyway. You can see it doesn't even quite make it to the end. That's by design. But the hole should basically go all the way to the end. So if you can imagine it inside of there, it would look about like that. So don't go and drill in too far. You could actually drill the head right off this thing. So this drill here happens to be an 81 thousandths 0.081 inches. So again, I like to do this by hand. You can put this thing in a drill motor if you want, but just go real slow and careful. And again, you're only going to want to go that depth where you're going to feel it sort of stop here, again, about this deep right here. So just spin that thing by hand, or if you're doing it with a drill motor, just do it real sort of gentle. You know, don't get too crazy on this. Really, you're just trying to open up the bore, and you can see some plastic came out. You know, maybe do it 2 or 3 times until you feel like you've sort of removed all the material that's going to come out. So again, usually I run it in back and forth a few times. There you go. So having done that, it's going to be a little bit better. You can see it goes in a little bit further than before, but it's still got some issues. So the other issue with 3D printed parts, especially with ones this small, is sometimes in the printing direction, the parts may have a different thickness than in the other direction. The parts are printed, you know, sort of like this, layer by layer by layer. And so these little shafts don't actually end up totally circular. So actually, if we take a caliper and we put it on these, if we put it on this way with the head of the shock sort of facing side to side like this, we can see that this is about 80. Let's see here. This is about 80 thousandths almost in that direction. And then if we turn it this way, so this thing is sort of perpendicular to the caliper, you can see now it's more like 72. Well, it's actually supposed to be about 72, 74, something like that is what I designed it for. So the parts actually print a little bit thick in this direction here. So if you got a caliper, you can check this for yourself. And probably what you're going to see is that in this direction here, it's a bit on the thick side. So really the only cure for that is to take a small fine file. I've got this little set of files here. I think they came from Granger. They're not overly coarse because again, you're just using them on plastic. So you want to sort of concentrate on the sides of this that were thick. So again, holding it like this, it would be what I would call the top here, and then flip it over here, the opposite side here. So really what you want to do is you want to kind of file on the top, again what I'm calling the top, the thick side. And so just try and go real uniform here. What you don't want to do is you don't want to just create a flat spot on here. This thing is basically comes out oval from how they print it. So usually what I do is I'll take the file, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on here, but I'll kind of work the file back and forth like this. So I'm mainly filing on, again, what I'm calling the top here, which is the side that the eye on here faces. But I try and do this like back and forth motion where I'm gonna make the thing round instead of oval, but not just create a big flat spot on it. So you do this a little bit, you'll actually see some of the white material down there starting to show. You know, don't worry about that. You can Sharpie it later if you want, but it's going to be kind of inside the shock. So, you know, it shouldn't matter. But that's kind of what you're going for, is about like that. And make sure you get all the way up to the top here where the shaft of this thing sort of sits on this little round part. So again, just kind of back and forth. Again, you're trying to keep the thing round, and then flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. A little bit back and forth. You know, just take your time here. But this is basically what you're doing. And then again, if you do have a caliper, you can periodically check your work and make sure that, again, you're shooting for something of about 72 to 74 thousandths of an inch thick for this shaft. So you just got to kind of work it a little bit here. Let's see where we are now. So this was the thick direction here, and actually you can see I got it down to about 73, which is about where I want it. And then if I turn it in the other direction, it was already 73, the thin direction. So this should be getting pretty decent now. So yeah, now actually you can see this slides in and out of here really easy. So you know, just check it. If it feels like it's a little bit tight, remove a little bit more material. If it's not, then you're golden. Again, if having a little bit of white showing on here, which probably won't be very noticeable when you put the spring on, you know, if that bothers you, again, just take your Sharpie or take some kind of black paint or whatever and just touch it up a little bit. So there you go. Basically, that's what you're going to do to make the shocks so they actually slide easily back and forth. So now what you got to do is you got to address the hole in the top of the shock. So again, this is what I call the top of the shock and the bottom of the shock. So the top of the shock, again, is this piece. It's the piece that has the hole in it, the thicker part. So with that one, what you want to do is you want to drill that one out with a 86 thousandths drill. So that's 0.086 inches, because that is where the little eye, or excuse me, the little collar is going to slide inside that hole. And so again, you know, a lot of times holes print a little bit smaller than they're supposed to. So you just sort of pop a drill in here to ream this out. And again, this is an 86 thousandths drill here. So again, with these, you can probably just run them in by hand, real easy like that. And then likewise, the bottom one now is going to be a little bit smaller because I actually designed these shocks so they won't need that little collar on the bottom. So for those, you're going to use a smaller drill. That's actually a 63 thou, 0.063. And again, you're just kind of opening that hole up a little bit because it's probably going to be tight because that's how holes usually just print. So there you go. You open the bottom up with the 63 thou, you open the top up with the 86, and then you ream the shaft where the actual shock rides inside there with the 81 thou, and then you're gonna gently file the shaft here until it's about 70, sort of 72, 73 thou in diameter. And again, because as they print, they're not really circular. So really what you're just trying to do is grind on. Oop, that's the one that I hadn't filed. So you're just trying to grind on it or file on it a little bit. So it's about, you know, 72, 73 thou in diameter. But mainly what you want to do is you want to feel that it's actually smooth with the other mating part of the shock body. And so you can see this one now is moving real freely. So I would call that fine. So yeah, just do that to both shocks and you're ready to go. So if you order a kit and you order the one that has the shocks on it, and then if you go to order the hardware kit from me that again has these little collars that you can see here that I'm going to make a video on soon, just let me know what shocks you're using on your kit. If you're using the associated ones, I think I mentioned you're going to need the bigger collars. If you're using either my shocks or if you have the older style associated ones with the hole in, then you use the 72 thou collars, which are the smaller collars. So I'll give you guys all that information on the hardware kit on another video and let you know exactly what you need to let me know so that you get the right parts to put your kit together. So that's it for this one. Thanks.